Hey folks, Amanda here. Just a quick heads up that from time to time, the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast does include some adult language. So if you've got kids with you, you may just want to hold on to this episode to listen to a little later. Enjoy! Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. I'm Amanda Sollman, and along with Mark Jewell, your host for this show and the creator of the Surviving to Thriving movement. Each week, we'll dive into the mindsets that keep us in survival mode and learn how to get on the path to a truly thriving life. If you're looking for a wake-up call and want some valuable tools to get there, you have come to the right place. After all, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. Now, let's head over to the show.
Hey, welcome back everybody to another episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. This is your host and founder of the Surviving to Thriving movement, Mark Jewell, along with the lovely Amanda Sollman. Amanda, it's been a long time since we've done a show together. So
I know, nothing yet this season.
I know that you're the one pulling the strings behind the podcast. Just that with our new format here in season 2, sometimes we don't always have you on here because we've been doing a lot more interviews and a couple solo shows. So welcome back.
Absolutely. Glad to be back.
Awesome. So guys, today what we decided to do was go out to our Facebook following and engage directly with you, because I know that, from time to time you've got questions, issues, concerns, problems, maybe even some celebrations that we don't always get to talk about. Maybe we don't get into the specifics of what those things are. So yesterday, put a post out on the Facebook and was asking what are some of those things that the frustrations or places where either your employees or your bosses are missing the mark for you just a little bit. And so Amanda and I are going to go through those things one by one here today and just kind of see what of our methods, what of our models can help you through some of those sticky situations. So Amanda, how's that sound for you?
I am totally game. Let's do it.
All right, we're going to dig into it. So my friend Sam up in Minnesota posted on here that sometimes bosses don't see, or leadership, in the company doesn't see the vision of where we could go because the status quo has become good enough. And, I think a lot of people can relate to that. Sometimes as an employee, we see the vision for what could be, or we see a better way for getting a process done, or a better way to build the business, or a direction that the company could go in. But the leadership isn't quite there yet, right? And so that's pretty common. When you think about the words that Sam used are status quo. Like, let's be honest, that's a thing that often happens. Okay, and so the question is, what do you do? Because maybe you're chomping at the bit. Maybe you see the potential that's out there in the field. Maybe you can see from your position the undiscovered potential. But at the same rate, your boss is so busy being caught up in the weeds, leading the company, following through on a current strategy that's in the middle of being executed, and this isn't the right time for it. There's a lot of different things that can that can create that. So, Amanda, I'll toss this to you first. Where have you come across this? Where have you seen this? Where do you see this popping up with some of our customers? I know this is not a new one necessarily for us.
Yeah, no, and I'll kind of be interested for us to talk a little bit more about this question because I don't know Sam. I know, Mark, you know him a little bit better, but when I read the question, I actually read it going the other way too, where maybe you're a leader who has vision or has big picture strategy, but your employees aren't ready to follow that big picture, that vision, that strategy. So I think it might be interesting for us to take it from both directions, because I think maybe the approach might be different depending on which side of the table you're sitting in and where maybe that hesitation to move from the status quo is coming from. But if we take from kind of the original point of view, so maybe you're out in the field, you see some really awesome opportunity, but leadership maybe isn't quite there yet. For me, I'm seeing it from two different angles. So one from your own angle and what you can do with the abilities that you have, with the leverage, the freedom you have in your role. So, we always talk about that, you're 100% responsible for where you are and what you're getting right now. And so I always think, okay, maybe the leadership team isn't quite there yet, but what can I do, or what can I ask for, or what can I go get? So often folks that we hear from out in the field are like, well, my boss hasn't given me permission to do this, or the leadership won't approve this, but yet they haven't asked the question. They haven't pushed the topic. They haven't gone out and really done the work to see if they can actually go get that opportunity that they believe is out there. Because I don't know about you, but most companies I think that we work with, and most of the management teams we talk to, if there's real opportunity, not just like, well, maybe there might be opportunity, maybe there might not be, but if you've really got a good feeling that you've got an opportunity for sales or new business in your territory, in your region, and obviously we're talking about this primarily from a sales perspective, although it applies in other situations, but rarely is a manager going to turn down sales.
Right.
So the question I would have there is, what are you doing to do the work to go out and get that opportunity in the limits of your own power?
Absolutely.
The other thing that I was thinking about too is what can you do to help the management team see that vision? Where can you do a case study, or where can you say, if I get this, I think in the next 2 to 3 years we can grow that business to this, really paint the picture. So that's one thing too. I think so often we expect direction to come from top down, but there's a lot of opportunity for that guidance to come from the bottom up, from those people in the field who are experiencing it every single day.
Absolutely. So there was a time, this comes back to, this is a story about Amanda, you guys. So, Amanda came to me a year and a half ago almost, and basically said, hey, I'm at that point, it's time for me to go on to what's next for me. And she effectively pitched me, and she said, what do I need to do to get myself ready to help you take your business to the next level? And that was pretty much the question as I remember it. And I remember being really impressed by that fact and said, okay, so somebody else out here believes in what I'm creating, believes in what I'm doing, wants to be a part of that, and is interested in how can we, what part of that could I play in helping to create that vision. And so from a leadership perspective, when we hear those things from employees, those outside ideas, those productive questions that kind of challenge you to level up, a lot of the time it's going to be welcomed, and they might at least consider it. To Amanda's point before about how do you show them the value, right? How can you show them? Are you waiting for permission? So here's what a lot of people do. Here's what we see a lot of either our clients do, or people that come to me and say, my boss is such a jerk. They don't see it my way. Or, the person I work for is just such a dick. They're so small-minded. They're not into it. They don't get it. And but I have to kind of take a step back and evaluate, the resource for where it's coming from, because the core belief that I have is that everybody's doing the best that they can with what they have, given where they're at right now. And so just because that leader is not necessarily open to your idea right now, just understand that they may be at a certain place where they can't see that vision. They spiritually, mentally, physically don't have the capacity to be able to understand that more is available. And so if you're in this role saying, well, my boss doesn't get it, or my boss doesn't care, chances are, I want you to just kind of lean into that and look into that a little bit, because that actually says more about you than it does about them. Because at the same rate, I could go to that same person who's griping about their boss not seeing the vision, and I can go back and I can say, what have you done to actually show them that this is possible? Right? Are you waiting for permission? Are you waiting for them to tell you that it's, good job on something that hasn't been done yet? I guarantee, if Amanda or Wade or Emily or our new guy coming on board, John, next month, if somebody goes out and creates some business and says, hey, I've got an event that we can run and I've got 6, 10, 12, 20 people lined up ready to rock and roll, do you think I'm going to say no to that, even if it's something that's maybe a little bit off center or a new market? No, absolutely not. I mean, we want to stay true and clear on what we do and who we are. But if it's a small variation of that, then I'm not going to say no, right? I'm going to find a way that we can make that happen or get it done. Or is there another way of looking at it? And so the question is, from a employee perspective, are you sitting back waiting for permission? Now, there's some lines and some boundaries that maybe can't be crossed, and you may have some competitive things and contracts and so forth that that could be getting in the way. So even if you can't necessarily go and take action on that, there's nothing that prevents you from putting in some weekend hustle and writing a proposal for why what you say makes sense. I guarantee if you're putting in some of the time to show how this makes sense, that you're going to get attention for your idea. That doesn't guarantee that your idea gets bought, by the way. You're just selling stuff internally. But the reality is, if you actually put in the time to defend and do the research and show why this is a viable vision, for the future company, you're going to at least get an audience to be able to defend your case. And so often what it is, it's like, hey, boss, I got this idea. Or, hey, there's so much more out here. I think we could do this. And that boss is maxed out and you're maxed out and there's just no other time to go and create this. And so if you're willing to put in the hustle to actually defend the case or actually start and go make it happen to the point where they can't ignore you, you will get attention.
And I want to kind of reiterate what you were saying there in terms of doing the hustle, of making the case, in terms of being specific about what you want and what you want to go do. Mark, you and I have worked with people in the past who are like, well, I think there might be some opportunity, for example, if, maybe I want to do some test plots with people who aren't customers right now. And so I asked my boss, can I get some extra plot seed? But without going and saying, this is the farm I want to put it on. This is the potential I see with this farm. This is what I'm hoping to get out of this test plot. That email just sort of disappeared into the ether. And if you are making a case for why leadership should believe in your vision, it better be a strong case. Because the other point I wanted to add to this is sometimes when we are at that employee level where we're specific or where we're responsible for a relatively small portion of the business, if you look at the overall business, we sometimes lose perspective of what those senior leaders are responsible for. So, if we are responsible for a handful of accounts, we can see the vision for our accounts. Or if we're responsible for a certain geography, we can see the vision in that geography, and we don't understand often why leadership won't buy into some of what we want to do in our specific area. And we forget that in those senior management roles, that they have to look at the whole and what is best for the whole. And sometimes what it works in your area of the world doesn't always work across the region or across the country. It's not that it can't be done, but you have to remember that their focus is not only in your territory or your segment of the business. So that's just not where their brain is all the time. So you have to make that case as to why they should pay attention to your portion of the world, because that's just not what's at the top of the mind all the time.
Absolutely. I think that's spot on. So be cognizant of what else is going on, right? So there's a lot of things, especially when you get to that leadership level. I think from an employee perspective, sometimes we look up the chain of command, we look up the ladder, and we operate under the assumption that whoever's leading me knows exactly what to do right now. Right? And that's almost never the case. I mean, I look at some of the most mature companies that we do business with, and at the highest echelons of those companies, they're in new territory. They may be having more profit this year than they've ever had in the past, or they may be having less profit this year than they've ever had in the past. And there's reorganization and mergers and acquisitions and all kinds of stuff going on, specifically in agriculture, right, within our business. And there are people literally making it up as they go. Right? We don't know. We've never had, a deal where Syngenta gets bought out by ChemChina. So now we're doing business with the Chinese. We have, the Bayer Monsanto thing going down right now on on the chemical side of the business. And so that merger is taking place. We're looking at one of the the ag-reliant brands that we were talking about last week, right? So you have many, many brands under one umbrella being merged into one or two brands, going forward. In the cooperative segment, we have tons and tons of mergers and acquisitions going on to the point where we predict there will be very, very few co-ops left. And so, your leader at your particular co-op may just be trying to hold on to what they have, or, they may be getting approached and being talked to about potentially acquiring or merging or whatever. And so there's all this stuff that's literally never happened before. And I just want to take a step back, actually, when you think about it. There's never been a cooler time specifically to be involved in agribusiness because of all the change and the way that things are happening. I can guarantee you the industry as you see it today will not exist exactly the same a decade from now. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, in 2027, we will be looking at a very, very different way that we're doing business. You will see a lot of the brands that are available today will no longer be out there 10 years from now, right? They will be rebranded, merged, acquired, et cetera, et cetera. It will be looking very different. The way that we deliver product and sell product will be different. Even some of the crops that we may be farming 10 years from today could start to look different as we have higher demand for other things, right? The way that we farm them. So a lot of different things going to be happening. And so I'm getting off a little bit of a tangent here, but just know that, if you see that vision, if you see where this thing could go, I know one guy that we talked to just recently who's more involved on the data side of the industry, and the precision ag side of things, sees a vision and his company doesn't. And so he's out here proving a model that his company just absolutely cannot ignore. And he's getting a lot of attention. And so either the company will level up or he's going to get picked off. And I'll just be really honest, like if you as a leader, or if you as I'll just say this to start off, if you as a leader are not recognizing the potential that's in your employees and helping them to grow in some of their strength areas in a way that helps you make more money or be more profitable as a business, you probably deserve to lose them. If you're not paying attention and if you're not leveling up to keep your people leveling up with you, if they're leveling up faster than you are, you're going to lose them. And I'll be honest, you deserve it. That is the blunt force, honest truth. Okay. Same happens here at MJST. I constantly feel pushed by you guys. Sometimes I'm pulling the cart. Sometimes I'm getting pushed. And so it's but that's a good, healthy relationship because it keeps us getting better, right? It helps us continue to grow, and we probably could even do that even faster. Some days we are, some days we aren't. It's just it's a constant sort of dance between what's too much and what's not enough, mm-hmm. right? So I think leaders need to be cognizant of that big time. And so, from an employee perspective, also, if you've got these ideas and you're not doing anything about them, then, what good are you? Just for our Thrive Today Ascension group yesterday, I did a training on what the hell are you waiting for? Right? What are you waiting? Are you waiting for permission, or are you going to go out and start doing something and proving that you have massive value to the company? Because that's the number one way to get the attention that you deserve. So, Amanda, I want to transition here real quick and start talking to the leader, right, or about the leaders in this situation, because that was the other space that you brought up. And as I reread Sam's comments and his follow-up comment, I think that was probably a more accurate interpretation of his particular question, right? So, but if you as a leader see the vision for where your company could go, and your team or your people are not bought into that because they're just, fat and happy right where they are, because if life doesn't have to change and I don't have to change, then everything's going to be fine, right? And that's really our definition of survival according to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving. Go back to episodes 8 through 16 or something like that when we went through the various steps of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving. But surviving happens for basically two reasons. One is you have undiscovered potential within yourself or within your people, or people get complacent. Right, and so when we get complacent, that's status quo to me is literally survival mode, and I can't stand it. That's why I talk about what I talk about. It's why I say things the way I say them, and with so much emphatic passion about it. But what do we do, right? So what do we do when we have people that are not willing to level up? So Amanda, in your case, in the couple companies that you've worked with all the people that we've worked with from a coaching perspective, what are some some of the ways, what are some of the things that you've seen that are effective to help wake people up or help them discover that they could do more, dream bigger, be happier, be more productive, have something more?
Yeah. So as I kind of think about this angle on the question, I keep coming back to kind of three general ideas on this. So if you are a leader and you have a vision and you're just not getting people to buy in or want to take action on that, one is that probably, and this is just from experience of being exposed to lots of different companies and how corporate hierarchy works and how corporate communication works, there may be a good chance that from a leadership level, you have not communicated well enough the quote unquote, what's in it for me back to your employees. And so that kind of ties in, Mark, with that undiscovered potential where your employees have not identified, either you haven't identified it for them or they haven't identified it for themselves as to why I should buy into your vision. Why is this important? Why do I care? What's in it for me? And if you, from a leadership standpoint, not necessarily just you as an individual, but your leadership team, your executive level folks, if that has not been communicated clearly, repeatedly, throughout the organization, there's a good chance that you may think you have a vision, but your people don't know what it is or why they should care.
100%.
So that's the first thing that's coming through to me. The second thing is, you may have a vision and your people may understand what your vision is, but they don't see how they fit within it. And for me, that's a conversation around strengths. Is, what do I bring to the table that could help me contribute to your vision?
Right.
Because right now I'm sitting at status quo because I know what I'm doing and I know that I'm good at it. And I'm just kind of uncertain as to how I fit into your vision. And so it's safer to stay where I'm at, being, maybe, yes, being a little complacent, but I know how to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an opportunity for a question about, or a conversation about, I think these are the strengths you bring to the organization, and I think these are how these strengths can play into bringing this vision to life. And now you also have identified the what's in it for me.
Right.
Because that person personally can say, all right, here's where I get to contribute. Here's where I get to feel fulfilled. Here's where I get to push myself towards this larger organizational vision. So that's kind of the second. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just want to piggyback on what you're saying there, because when somebody is stuck in that survival mindset at status quo, what you should just be aware of is that change for them is going to feel very scary, right? So it's like, if I want my team, to start venturing into a new market or doing some new skills and some new things, then I got to be thinking about, what additional time is this going to take? What additional training is this going to take? Am I going to have to do my current job plus this new thing? And is that going to take me away from my family? What if I have to try something new and it fails, right? So there's all these things that people start to think about, and that's why we resist change, is because to some extent it's scary. Now I'll make the point that sometimes people make change because of pain or fear, right? But the reality is, one of the reasons that we resist change is because I look at what's going to have to happen, and I kind of look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, I don't know if I can see myself in that new version of myself to be able to do that new thing. And man, sometimes as a leader, it's like, to you, it looks so simple and it looks so easy, yet that person who follows you may not be at the same mindset level. They may not be at the same motivation level. Chances are they're certainly not at the same salary level. And so now if I'm looking at the fact that I have to put in additional time and money or resources or whatever, then it looks like, is this worth it, to me? Like, why do I have to change? And so just be cognizant. I'm just, stating that because I want people to be aware of the fact that that's one of those things that happens. And I'm reminded of our, what we teach with, the Tony Robbins stuff that we teach, called the 6 basic human needs. And so, we all have that basic human need for variety, but some of your employees need much less of it. And so just be aware of that and be cognizant. So from the employee side, we say, hey, just understand your leader's doing the best that they can given where they are at right now with what their capacity is. And then understand that for the most part, your employees are doing the best that they can with what they have given where they're at right now. And the willingness to change is going to boil down to how engaged are they? How much do I understand where we're going? How much am I bought into the mission of our company and the fact that I'm an important part of that? And if I don't have those elements existing in my environment, the change is always going to be resisted.
And the other concept that we teach that also keeps coming to me is, and Mark, you've talked about it before, this idea that when you have really good clarity, when you know what you want to accomplish, and you have really high certainty that you're confident in the fact that you have the knowledge, the skills, the ability to get what you want, it makes executing a lot easier. And I think, if you're in a leadership position, you're being paid to have that clarity and that certainty, right? Like, you are being paid to have that vision and to believe that that vision is possible. And I think that's another perspective shift. We talked about perspective shift from an employee standpoint of understanding what senior management is going through, but I think we also have to do kind of a little perspective shift as well from senior management more to employee level, is that at the employee level, they may not always have that clarity and that certainty that through experience or through expectations that you in a senior management role are expected to have, which is going to make execution possibly harder for them if they don't have those elements. So I think from a leadership standpoint, when it comes to vision, how can you increase their level of clarity around what that vision is, and how can you help them increase their level of certainty that they have the ability to achieve that vision and that they have a role in achieving that vision, because I think then you're going to start seeing the movement, the execution towards that vision that you're looking for.
You bet.
So that was the other thing. And I had the third thing that came to mind as this topic came up, and maybe this is the pessimistic or the realistic side of me, but there may be a point where you say you just don't have the right people on the bus. And if you from a leadership standpoint say, I have this vision for the company, this is the direction that the company is moving forward, in some cases you will never be able to bring those people along with you. And you have to decide if they bring enough other things or if they are just not the right fit for your organization. And especially when there's big sweeping change in the vision of an organization, you might find that more often in those big sweeping change situations than maybe you would in small changes here and there. But I think that is a very real situation that happens out of there, and you just have to weigh the pros and cons of what each employee brings to the table, because the fact of the matter is, if you've got a vision, it's not good for you or the employee to not be bought into that vision and moving with the whole. So that's a possibility that's out there.
Well, I think you need to be realistic about the kind of people that you have on your team. If your business is shifting or you're trying to tackle a new market, do they have the right skill sets to help you accomplish that? And that's something that you get to pay attention to. And, maybe they do have the right skill sets. The question is, are they willing to? And then you get to decide, what are your standards, right? So one of my coaches always says, you get what you tolerate, right? Mm-hmm. And so if that's true, then, what will you tolerate? How long will you tolerate people not stepping up to the plate to perform at a higher level? And if they're not willing to step up and go with you, then they're either going to peel off, or you get to start to minimize them to the point where they, we call it managing out, yep. Right? Yep. And that's a thing that can happen.
Well, and, it doesn't always have to be with, organizational, sales strategy or marketing strategy. I mean, it can happen very much from, even like an operation standpoint. Mark, we have a client who, has a vision of having basically no safety incidences, right? They want to have a very, very safe working environment. And they set a standard of what was expected from an equipment standpoint, from a standard operating procedures standpoint, from all of these different perspectives. And the fact of the matter is, they ran into situations where they had people who were just not willing to rise to that standard. And those people are no longer with the organization. That was a situation, tough decisions were made, because in this case, straying from the vision was not an option. And so I think that's what, on a case-by-case basis, that might be a situation that, when it comes to organizational vision, where you have to make some of those tough choices.
Absolutely. So that's a tough, and they have some people that were actually pretty decent employees that are no longer there because they got made an example of, right? They broke the rules and, didn't have high vis or wouldn't wear the safety glasses or whatever the case may be. And now they don't, they're working for other companies. So that's where you say these are our standards, right? And so that doesn't always have to be just like a stick method, right? And that's very much what we call the stick method. There can be, you can utilize the carrot method, and this is just one thing that I'll tag on here, is as you cast that compelling vision for the future as a leader, here, you talk about that. You put that vision out in front of your people. You clearly communicate, to your point, Amanda, what is that? What does that look like? How are we going to market? What is the end the end product or the end service, going to look like? And, here's your part in that, right? So you can clearly explain that. Now the employee gets to decide at the end of the day. I never put this fully on the leader because I don't think it's ever fully their fault in any direction. The employee's got to take responsibility. But the leader is responsible for casting a clear vision, removing any and all roadblocks that can be removed, right? Keeping people safe, and then creating an amazing work environment within which people want to be motivated. If they then choose not to, then that's on them. And that's how you really know whether you got the right people on the bus or not. So I'm pretty good with that one, Amanda. Do you have anything else to add on to that, or should we put a?
No, I think we dove into that one pretty darn deep.
That was we got really. It took almost a half an hour to get through to get through that one. So all right, so Ryan wrote and he said, I want my employees to work as hard or harder than I do. And I read this last night and I kind of meditated on it just a little bit, and to kind of think like, well, what does that really mean? Yeah, what does that look like? And I think to some effect, it comes back to exactly what we were just talking about, which is, are you creating that environment within which people would actually want to do that? Are they clear on what you're creating? Are they clear on what is the mission, vision, value, cause of the company, and what their part of that job is? This gets really, really sticky sometimes when you think about, some of Ryan's employees are going to be hourly. This may not be like, the folks that work for you may not have considered that I could go to work today and only do my passion, or want to work in my passion. And so, this is somebody, maybe they're, blue collar. I just want to go do a job. I want to do my job well. I want to be happy at work. I want to go home and have a beer. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, is that person willing to work hard or harder than you do? Like that is it's a very, very subjective thing. So that's one actually watch out that I want to toss back to Ryan. I'm hoping he comes back and listens to this later is, okay, that's cool. What does that look like? Mm-hmm. Right. Because that's, that is a really, really tough thing to measure. Right. Mm-hmm. And so how am I rewarding that? How will I know if somebody is working as hard or harder than I am? And really, at the end of the day, I think the best you can do is work hard to create the environment that people want to be motivated in, that people want to come and work in, where people are engaged with what they do, to create the environment within which people know what their job is and what they're doing, and that their job is important, to create the environment within which people want to show up every day. And that's important, right? And then clearly understanding what are the expectations of my job. That stuff is important. I get a little bit cautious when I see leaders saying, I want my employees to work as hard or harder than I do. Well, is that every day? Right? Is that 4 days a week? Like, what? So if I'm on vacation this week, then that makes that bar pretty easy. Back, right? Back at the shop. You know what I'm saying? And if I feel sick today, if I'm not as ambitious and cheery and whatever as I usually am, if I'm not going if I'm like 70% of my normal capacity, then where does that level out? One of the things that I know is that, people as a leader, people are always eventually going to, elevate, and they will surpass you from time to time. Sometimes they can even make you look bad, but because they're going to outwork you, they're going to put in more hours than you, whatever the case may be. But the reality is, eventually people will kind of level up or elevate, to what your average level of hard work is, right, on a daily basis. So if they see you taking a lot of time, they see you doing a lot of personal stuff, and you're not constantly challenging them within their passion areas, people kind of level off, to the level of what the leader does. And so that's a really tough one to answer. But Ryan, you got to get your, in my opinion, buddy, you got to get your definition around like what is as hard or harder.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that we talk a lot about the idea of results, and that the one true feedback that's out there is, are you getting the results you want? And so that's, to me, that's always something to think about in a professional atmosphere, is that hard work, quote unquote, hard work does not necessarily look the same for everyone. But the question is the work that's being done getting the results you want? Now, or if it's not, then clearly there needs to be some work done on the process. But sometimes I think, especially, as we see different mindsets about what hard work looks like, there can be conflicts, because there's this belief that, you should work the same way that I work, and that's not always necessarily true.
Right.
So as, Ryan or whoever else is thinking about this question and what does that look like for you, I would caution you to be too eager to say, well, it looks like putting in the exact same hours as I do, or being in the the exact same type of places that I am, or whatever that is, because everybody's going to approach that a little differently, and again, that also goes back to a strength set and what are their strengths to ultimately get to those results.
Right. So my question, on top of that, right, just to keep going, is what if somebody is able to work in their strength area and they make it look so freaking easy? Mm-hmm. Right. And so now I make it look incredibly easy, and I'm super productive, and I'm helping the company make money, be profitable, be efficient, serve customers, whatever. But it just looks easier than you make it look. Right. So now do I judge that person? And that, let's be honest, that's what happens a ton in the corporate America. I even know from my wife's example that it actually happens in academia. So she's come back to me and said, if I do too much, if I take on, if I actually show up to work and look happy, then they give me more stuff to do. Yep. Right? So Vanessa is incredibly efficient. I would be surprised if efficiency doesn't show up on her strength scope report. And so she's effective and efficient, and she can sit down in a couple hours, and 2 hours for her is probably 8 hours for me. Yep. As far as getting tasks done. And she is, I would say, above the curve for normal humans. She's superhuman when it comes to being able to execute on tasks. So she gets that done, and if she walks over to Starbucks and she's got all this time, guess what happens a week later? Oh, well, Vanessa has all this time. Let's put her on another committee. Right? Let's give her more shit to do. Right? Because she has all this time. And that is one of the fastest ways that you can turn and burn your people, because you actually make them feel underappreciated for what they're already doing. Yep. Especially if the context of the new thing is not in alignment with where they see themselves going at your company. So that's a huge watch out. There's a lot more into this question than I thought there was going to be.
Well, and I think on that topic of expectation, so there's that side of it. What does it look like? But I know, Mark, you and I and our team has looked at some new Gallup research around, what are the expectations of work? And so, if you as a leader are like, man, my expectation is if I'm putting in 8, 10, 12 hours a day, then they should be too. There are some shifting expectations around whether or not people actually want work to play that large of a role in their day, in their life. And so I think that's a real question is, if this is an employee or employees you want to keep, are you honoring their place for work in their larger, more expansive life?
Right.
because maybe, maybe they are putting in their 8 hours, like you said, and that's, they're working hard in those 8 hours, but they don't want to put in the extra 2-4 hours, that's just not how they see the role of work. So I think that's also something that plays into what is the expectation and what does hard work look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of ways. We could probably do a whole episode just on that. We should pull that Gallup data, Amanda, and actually just do an episode around what's the new expectation, what are some of the trends that we're seeing in the corporate workplace, because I will predict, I said this at the beginning, work and life and the industry is going to look a lot different 10 years from today than it does right now. And so I'll use myself as an example. I run a business and the CEO, and so I think there's a large interpretation out there that says, wow, MJST is growing and we're seeing them more and more all over the place. Wow, Mark must be just doing nothing but working. In fact, the most common question that I get is like, well, do you have to travel a lot? Like, are you gone all the time? And the reality is no, really. I mean, what we've done is we've built the business so that we can do most of our events right here in Omaha, right? I mean, sometimes I like to get on a plane and go. Sometimes it's more fun for me to go to Minneapolis or Columbus. Those are kind of two other cities that we seem to be frequenting right now. But the reality is, like, we have two highly motivated people living and working in my household, and we have 3 kids. Right? So that lends itself to a whole new level of challenge. So that's the case, not only just for me, but for others. And so what I've had to do is find a way to adapt and be able to live my life where I can have my business and be able to work in my passion, and then also allow my wife the space to be able to work in academia, which is an equally, if not more, demanding career than I have. And she provides the insurance benefits for our family, so I got to keep that one rolling, right? But she has other things that she wants to do. And so in the past, we have this mindset that you work, that's kind of primary, and then you fit everything else in where you can, right? And what's part of what we're trying to prove around here is that doesn't, work is definitely a priority, but I'm also making sure that I'm getting time in for my kids. And does that mean that sometimes I pull back and things don't go as quickly at work? Probably. Right? Like, let's be honest, that's probably the case. But we're also, creating an organization that honors that for everybody, regardless. Right? And so Emily was full time. She says, I want to be a stay-at-home mom. Great. Awesome. How much of the life do you want work to be? And so that's being scaled back, right? So she's going to work a few hours a week, 10, 15 hours a week and support us from that. But then she has the flexibility to stay home. So we're starting to see more and more relationships like that crop up in the corporate workspace. And so, you might be able to get full-time benefits working with a company down the road, a larger organization, but you're only working 25 hours a week, right? As long as those are the most productive 25 hours that a person can give, then you reward that person based on whatever it is, right? So maybe now you have 2 people that fill that role, right? It's the same cost from an employee perspective to the company, but now I'm creating a more flexible life because that person values being able to take their 4-year-old to swimming lessons over the summer months, which happen to be at like 8:30 in the morning. Right? And that's an example, I guess, of a thing that could happen. And so can organizations become more flexible in the way that they approach people? Yep.
I've always been an advocate for evaluate performance based on output, not based on how many hours it took to get that output. I mean, that being said, there are caveats to that. Like, again, It shouldn't take you a bazillion hours to do a fairly simple task. But as long as the time taken is fairly, realistic and understandable, if I can do that task in 2 hours, that takes you 4 hours, and both of those are acceptable, then the person who can get it done in 2 hours should not be punished for that. So those are just, that's something to think about. One other, I know we've got a couple more questions that we want to roll to, but once that you identify what does hard work look like, what are those expectations about the work that needs to be done, I think there is opportunity for you to evaluate your processes that facilitate that. So namely what I'm thinking is, are you hiring people who want to put in the work that you expect? Are you hiring for those expectations, or are you just trying to find butts to fill seats? Because there are a lot of cases where we need a job done, and so we hire, a butt to fill a seat, and then we find out, wow, we didn't quite approach that quite the way we should have.
Yeah.
So I think there's an aspect of that, and then the other question is, if you want them to work as hard as you do, or harder, depending on what that looks like, are you providing the support, the feedback, the training, the coaching, all of these things that help a person, not only stay motivated, but grow in their role so that they carry that momentum and that motivation forward, and they don't get bored over time. Because, I bet there are a lot of people out there who, when they first started a job, work really, really super hard, put in lots of hours, put in lots of effort. But as time went on and they weren't challenged, they weren't fulfilled, they got bored, that level of hard work dropped off. So I would also question, are you investing in your people to where they want to put in that effort? And that's something from a leadership standpoint I think you can evaluate.
Absolutely. Let's be honest, there's a lot of lazy leaders out there who, again, they're doing the best they can with what they have right where they are. But it's just as easy for leaders to get into that status quo, survival, complacent mindset.
I've heard leaders use the phrase, they're getting a paycheck. What more do they want?
What else?
And it's like,
why can't they just show up and do the damn job?
Exactly. And that's just, this is when the way we talk about, levels of value with our customers, in that, for the most part, transactional level value with customers doesn't work. Guess what? It doesn't really work with your employees either.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're just expecting that because you're paying them that they're going to show up and do, their top-notch job, that might work for people who are really self-motivated and really eager. But might be the case where you need to work up to some of that partnership level and value with your employees as well.
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of employers out there who are trying to get their employees to create partnership level relationships with customers, and then treating their employees like a number. And it's a transaction. And that's, Frank, I'll just be honest, that you deserve to lose that person if that's your mentality. I've said it once or twice in the podcast already. I'll say it again. If you're not willing to level up as a leader, you will lose them, and that should be a lesson that you have learned. What most people do is they just go back to doing the same old thing, right? Same old thing over and over, expecting different results, as Einstein defined as the definition of insanity. And also one of the questions that came from Brahm, which is when my leaders are, or it doesn't even have to be leaders, could be employees too, applying idiot's theory, as he called it, which is really the definition of insanity, doing what they always do, but expecting different results. Now, I'm going to lump that question in with a couple of other things that came up, a couple of other comments, because I want to take a little bit different approach to this one, Amanda, especially given the amount of time, and we're already 46 minutes into this podcast recording. And so I want to kind of honor people's time here and bring this in under an hour. But here's the thing. The last four comments that came up on Facebook were lack of vision, lack of urgency, lack of positive feedback. Actually, it says no positive feedback. And then people doing what they always do, but expecting different results, right? So lack of vision, lack of urgency, lack of positive feedback, and people doing what they always do, expecting different results. Now, I'm taking a little bit different angle, and I'm not necessarily taking the side of the person or the people who have posted these comments, because by rule, okay, and I've been talking a lot about this lately with our personal paid coaching clients, by rule, if I'm seeing something in someone else, then that feeling or that observation has to already also exist inside of me. And so, one of the things I talk a lot about is the power of the 95%. The fact that 95% of your subconscious was hardwired by the time that you turn 10 years old, that you've consistently for the rest of your life just been finding evidence to support your preferences, to support the stories that you're stuck in. And so sometimes what happens is we get stuck looking at life from a vantage point of, let's just say as an example, example, I look at my employees or I look at my boss and I say, they've got a huge lack of urgency. How can I get them to pick up the pace? Why can't I get them to pick up the pace? Okay, if I'm judging someone else from a standpoint of I think that they've got a lack of urgency, if I'm judging someone else because I'm getting no positive feedback, one of the simplest ways to start reframing this for you, because at the end of the day, let's be honest, you don't get to control them, right? You can create that environment for your employees that supports a sense of urgency. You can create that environment for your boss by adding value that supports the opportunity for them to give you more positive feedback. But here's the deal. If you are seeing someone in your life that just gives you no positive feedback, if you're seeing someone in your life who just has a complete lack of vision, then you also get to go and ask yourself the question, where do I sometimes lack vision in my own life? Okay. Where do I sometimes lack urgency in my own life? Where do I sometimes keep doing the same damn thing over and over and over, expecting different results in another aspect of my life? And where do I have some spaces in my life where I'm not giving myself enough positive feedback? If you want to know the root of what I'm getting at here, I recommend you go pick up the book Loving What Is by Byron Katie, Byron Katie, Katie. Loving What Is the book. Byron is actually a female in this case. And that book really changed the way that I look at judging others. And this is one of those things. And the reason I'm tackling these last 4 things, Amanda, with this method, as opposed to going one by one, like how to get people to take more urgency, right? Crack the damn whip. Okay, Lisa, like that's one way you can get it done, right? But what will happen, okay? And then we talked to a lot of people that have looked at, they're thinking about quitting their job, right? Because my boss doesn't give me any positive feedback, right? Or because so-and-so is a jerk. And then they quit the job and they go to the next job, and what happens? My boss is a jerk. They don't give me any positive feedback. My boss, so-and-so doesn't have any vision. I just keep running into all these other people that that keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. If people get divorced and get remarried, a lot of the times, like we actually know that second relationship has a higher rate of failure than the first one, right? Than the first marriage does in a lot of cases. And so what happens? Well, typically the person who got divorced hasn't actually healed the stuff. They haven't gone deep to find what are the things that they tend to find some of the same things showing up in that second relationship as was the case in the first relationship. They're just happening again. And so now who's the problem? Right? We need to look at the common denominator. And I see this a lot in the workplace of people judging other people for not being the way that they want them to be. Not being the way that they think that they should be. And it always boils back at the very, very core of it, where could I potentially give myself more positive feedback? That would be one of the number one exercises I could recommend for Julie. Where am I robbing myself of some positive feedback? Where am I too hard on myself? When you start to go to work on that problem, personally, what you might start to find is eventually, maybe not tomorrow, but probably a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, all of a sudden you're going to notice that your boss or other people around you are giving you more positive feedback. If Brahm were to answer the question, where do I sometimes find myself doing the same thing over and over and over again in acts of insanity? And what he would find, if he started taking action to maybe stop a couple of those things and try some different behaviors, what you start to magically notice is that others around you start to take the same kind of actions. If you find some places in your life where, a lot of people have a high sense of urgency at work, no problem. But then when I get home, like I'm freaking Netflix and chill as soon as 5:30 rolls around. Right? Even though the lawn needs to be cut, there's laundry to do, I got to balance my checkbook, whatever, check in on bills, go buy groceries, take care of my relationship, work out, et cetera, right? So there's all this other stuff. I have no sense of urgency. And I don't know Lisa's situation. I don't know enough about what's driving that, whether she's talking about her boss, whether she's talking about employees that she works with. But you can drive yourself nuts trying to change everyone around you, or you can go to work on the one person that you actually have control over. You know what I'm saying? And start to reframe a little bit of that for you. Herb is the person who posted lack of vision. Now, I happen to know that Herb has a massive vision. He has an incredible vision for what could be created, and his frustration is that his leadership doesn't see that same vision for him, and or for the service that he's bringing to the company. And there's a piece of this that says, okay, where am I lacking some vision? And there may be just parts of other vision that I could be lacking for myself that I'm not willing to see. This could also be life starting to push him in another direction. And I happen to know that he listens to the podcast, and that's a little bit of a hint there, buddy. You know which direction I think you should be pushing. But if you have this issue, for everybody else, if you have this issue where you think that your boss or the people around you lack vision, then the question you get to ask you is, what other parts of my life could I potentially have a greater vision for? Your marriage, your body, your connection to something bigger than you, your business, your contribution to life, whatever those things are, go to work on those things. And what you start to magically find is that wherever it is you're accusing people of not having vision, those start to tend to come back and almost magically start happening. So this is actually getting to the root of the cause as opposed to trying to fix someone else around you. So, Amanda, I don't know if you have anything to tag on to that. That's a big part of what I believe and how I've been able to create and get through a lot of those personal barriers that have been holding me back, sometimes continue to hold me back. But anytime I find myself in an attitude of blame, then I will say, okay, where am I potentially doing that also in my own life, and who would I be without that story? And what would start to happen? And as soon as I go to work on that, magically, guess what? So I say, I don't want my wife to be so judgmental when I don't have the house cleaned up, quite right. So then the flip side of that is, okay, so where are some places where I'm being judgmental of others for not delivering on my expectations? And when I go to work on those things, magically, guess what happens? I don't get judged as much at home. I see this with tons of our clients. I see this in a lot of areas of my life. I'll even see it in some of our coaching clients who commit to getting health results, even though we're not a nutrition coaching or a health coaching company, but they commit to getting that. And I'll notice, if I work out at least a little bit in some aspect every day, but if I don't do a series of intense workouts over the course of time, I start to notice my clients that don't have an intense workout routine, right? And what that is life presenting me evidence of something that I get to go to work on. So there you have it. We have covered a fair amount of ground here in this. This thing provided a lot of fodder for conversation here today. So thanks to everybody that
we're gonna have to do this again.
I know it. Yeah, exactly. So thanks to everybody that posted on Facebook and gave us some topics to think through and talk through. I hope that this has provided some value for you. So Amanda, where do we go? Where do we send people to go get some additional information on events and other things that if they want to stay tuned into what we got going on?
Absolutely. For all the latest information on our live events and coaching programs, as well as our ongoing coaching program, Thrive Today Ascension, which Mark mentioned earlier, back episodes of this podcast, past blog posts, all the good stuff, head on over to markjewelltraining.com. That's Jewell with 2 L's. And you will get all the goodies there, as well as links to all of our social channels.
Awesome. Hey guys, I'm just going to put a selfish plug in for that Thrive Today Ascension community. That is becoming even more of one of our flagship offerings. It's an ongoing piece. There's no live event required. It's very affordable, to get in there and get some feedback. And we have amazing people who are just participating in that without even coming to a live event that are getting epic results in their life. So pop on over there. We've got some information about it on the website. You can also just reach out to us through the website as well for more information. So looking forward to seeing you guys on the next podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, my friends, survival's dead. It's your time to thrive today. Let's go get it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in this episode by heading over to markjewelltraining.com/podcast. And if you feel so inclined, we'd love it if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. That's what helps us move up in the charts so that more people can find us and start their surviving to thriving journey. See you next week.